The following video will express no political commentary or opinions. It is regarding a sensitive geopolitical matter and the suffering of the common everyday Filipino people. Viewer discretion is advised. Hi, Nate here, and my expat lifestyle this month is currently in the Philippines, living on under $500 a month, or 30,000 pesos. This month might just be the absolute worst month for me to be doing this. As I'm sure, unless you've been living under a rock, you understand that there has been a major conflict taking place, a major global conflict. We are currently living under the largest oil disruption in all of world history. Some might equate it to the 1970s, but many people have said that this is the absolute largest oil disruption and energy disruption on Earth's history, at a time in history when we're more dependent on energy supplies than ever. The reason for this is pretty simple. America and Israel ended up attacking Iran, and Iran has closed the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz is responsible for about 20% of the global oil supply. This oil disruption has hit the Philippines particularly hard. In fact, it's one of the most affected countries in the entire globe. About 98% of the oil distribution to the Philippines has been disrupted. Their relatively low supply of oil reserves, and the fact that they only have one company as a refiner of crude oil. That company is Petron, which is a subsidiary or a underbusiness of the San Miguel Corporation. Knowing my audience, most of you guys probably only know the San Miguel Corporation as a major beer supplier for the Philippines and a global supplier of San Miguel Light and other alcohol products. But they do so much more. They're actually responsible for many things. With the Philippines being one of the most at-risk countries for this global supply shock of oil, they were the very first country on Earth to declare a state of emergency. This state of emergency, declared by President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr., has changed the landscape of the way the country is behaving. Now, while this state of emergency has opened up the potential for a lot of different changes, currently they have moved government work to a 4-day work week. The Energy Department has been authorized to basically do deals or negotiate regarding any future energy procurement. Hundreds of gas stations have been closed or had their hours shortened. Along with that, the government has released funds to assist in public transportation matters at the federal level. There are many other things that are taking place at the federal level, but we'll move on. Interesting, the emergency order was declared and its end date was pushed back an entire year, which is very interesting. It has many implications. There are many potential things that could happen, from emergency power-related lockdowns, flights canceled, industries getting preferential treatment of who is authorized to get electricity, who is allowed to have access to the power grid. And back to that flight matter, the President Marcos Jr. has been quoted as saying nothing is off the table. In regards to a question with will flights be shut down, he had stated that flights when they get to other countries are being refused to be refueled, meaning that the flights when they get there, they have to carry the fuel for there and a return trip. Now, the pure statement of nothing is off the table really means nothing is off the table until either the emergency order is revoked or it expires within 1 year. The effects of this global supply shock to oil and its 98% blocked oil supply to the Philippines has already been devastating to the country and already affected the impoverished people of the Philippines. And when I say impoverished, I do mean financially impoverished. They're extremely wealthy people when it comes to many, many, many other categories. You know, personally, I've seen it Just out here where I'm at, the gas prices have almost doubled. Before I would drive past the gas station, I would see gas for maybe like anywhere between 50 and 55 pesos usually, and now it's in the high 90s, mid 90s. Diesel fuel has gone sky high. The local government has put out emergency orders regarding the fares of the tricycles and public transportations. The prices have gone way up, and when you're already on a shoestring budget, that can be devastating to you. They're expecting and they're seeing a surge of inflation in between 6 to 7.5%, bringing the overall annual inflation expectation, the projected expectation of inflation for the year, to 5.1%. That's huge. That means people with a meager savings of, say, 10,000 pesos, or their salary is 10,000 pesos, that means their purchasing power is going to be degraded. And what cost them 10,000 pesos last year, this year, will cost them 10,510 pesos. That is a huge jump. Now, many businesses and people have responded. There have been protests in Manila, and many of the malls and different stores have shortened their hours. And you might say to me, Nathan, you're talking about a severe geopolitical matter with implications. Why do you care if the malls close and open early? If you've been out here to the Philippines, you understand the importance of the malls. Not only is it important for the GDP and the commerce, the domestic commerce of the Philippines, a lot of people go to the malls just to basically get out of the heat. It's one of the few ways you can go inside of a publicly paid air-conditioned area, a place to congregate with other people, a place to have clean bathrooms. This is a very extremely important matter, even though something like a mall does not seem important to most of us Westerners. Now, most of the Westerners that come here are tourists, and the tourism has already been affected. Flights have been canceled, ferry rides have been canceled. Here off of the island of Mindanao, Siargao Island, has already seen where they're decreasing the speed of the ferries in order to save on fuel costs. And one of the things that might happen in the future that's very important for tourism is the increased desperation of the people. If this continues to be a matter that is financially affecting all classes of Filipino people, especially the lower classes, increased desperation in people that make finances is not going to be good for your vacation. Even if it's something as simple as increased people begging you, people that are selling items become increasingly frustrated. People's attitude can only take so much when it comes to poverty and a change in their quality of life. This is an ongoing matter, and the strait has been closed for some time. There have already been steps to mitigate this issue. The Petron Corporation that we talked about, that's a subsidiary or an under-business of the San Miguel Corporation, has already secured 2.5 million barrels of oil from Russia. At 2.48, but we'll say 2.5 million barrels for this discussion. That's several days of fuel supply that can be refined and help out, basically postpone any kind of issues in the Philippines. It's also important that the refineries have continuous production, that there's not a shutting down and a reopening of the production facilities. And this is that stopgap measure that will really help out, even though it's only a couple days worth of supplies. And very interestingly enough, these supplies have been purchased not at what the global market is saying oil is going for, which is over $100 a barrel. It was purchased under the EU G7 agreement that all Russian oil must be purchased at a cap of $60 a barrel. So frankly, the Petron Corporation had got a heck of a deal on that oil considering the global climate right now. And you might say to me, well, Nate, Philippines is a hugely strong, important ally of the USA. Didn't they have restrictions for all allies in an agreement not to buy Russian oil? Well, that has been suspended by President Donald J. Trump and postponed for any shipments arriving prior to April 11th. So this is authorized with the prior agreements not to purchase Russian oil, and also authorized under the G7 EU agreements for a cap of $60 a barrel. Recently also, as of last night, an agreement has been made between the Philippines government and the Iranian government. The Iranian government has guaranteed that all Philippines flagged vessels will be allowed to pass through the Strait of Hormuz safely, and there were initial reports that they were going to be paying a few $1 million for every cargo vessel that passed through, but the Iranian government has come out and contested that and said that there will be no charges, as other countries have faced, $1 to $2 per barrel of oil in regards to the Philippines, which is actually very surprising because the Philippines is known as one of the strongest alliances and treaties and partnerships with America that there is. The Philippines and America have a long and rich history and a long and rich friendship and brotherhood. And the fact that Iran would give that kind of a deal is very interesting until you look a little deeper. When you look a little deeper, you'll see that there's only like 10 to 15 ships that are capable of going through the Strait of Hormuz that fly the Philippines flag. And you might say, well, how do they get 98% of their oil supply through the Strait of Hormuz if they only have 10 to 15 vessels that fly a Philippine flag globally? They could do that. They have more domestically that do domestic routes, but there's only like that many that are capable of international. It's actually very interesting. Most oil vessels carry what they call a flag of convenience. So this will be the Cayman Islands, Panama. Different countries offer no or low taxes and no or low licensure fees in order to fly a vessel under their flag. And that's actually a lot of the vessels that are going through the Strait of Hormuz. Now, there have been reports that Iran has also made a guarantee that no Filipino people or crew members will be harmed, which is unconfirmed but interesting because there's like hundreds of thousands of Philippine seafarers. They're well known as being a very seaworthy people. In fact, when I was in the U.S. Navy, we had an agreement where if a Filipino person wanted to join the Navy and they served 20 years, they were granted U.S. citizenship. And while they were in the Navy, they were treated just like everyone else. The exact same pay as an American, the same exact retirement, the same exact, every way, treated absolutely equal in every way, even though they weren't U.S. citizens until their retirement. They're also known throughout the world. You know, you look at the merchant mariners, tons of Filipino people. If you go from city to city, you'll see they have all the customs and all the maritime training facilities. They are a seafaring people, which makes sense. It's an island nation. So the fact that they would guarantee this when the Philippines works on just every country's boats that you can imagine is very interesting as a report, but I was unable to confirm that. One of the things that had some kind of confirmation to it was that they would not interrupt any Filipino oil supplies. This is a little bit more believable, that the Philippines government would guarantee that they would give the manifest of exactly what's on these vessels and would give some kind of guarantee that there would be no military aid coming in, no military supplies, no supplies for any kind of military invasion. I did see some confirmation of that. Nothing I will say is 100%, but that makes much more sense. Sadly, though, that doesn't mean that the prices will be going any lower anytime soon. For you expats out here that are still trying to get adjusted to the almost doubling of the fuel prices, and you're worried about the potential inflation that's ahead, the way I can describe what I've researched is that the fuel process has already been interrupted. Fuel manufacturing is already interrupted. This ability to get fuel shipments is not going to just bring everything back to normal right away. In fact, something like 5 million barrels were canceled within the first week. So you had an expected cargo shipment refinement to the sole oil refiner of the Philippines just gone, right? And you've had this massive delay. The government can do things like they have been doing, promoting public transportation, raising the price of certain transportation, raising the price of gas to decrease demand. And I've already seen it firsthand. A lot more people are walking when before they were catching the tricycle rides, they were catching the multi-cabs, they were catching the buses. And a lot of people are just parking their cars and not leaving. The way I would describe what's going to happen as the Strait of Hormuz opens, and if the Iranians keep their word that they won't be attacking any vessels and they'll allow free transit to and from the countries that supply the oil to the Philippines, is it'll stop the pain from getting worse, and it might relieve some tension. From everything I've researched, the prices still probably will remain high. There's insurance on a lot of these ships that is increased pretty drastically in order to carry the oil. And interesting enough, there were some documents released recently that I won't talk about too much here, but I know all my Americans know about it. There's a very interesting email regarding people's way of becoming wealthy on cargo insurance. But I digress. That insurance, along with the current disruption, should see things kind of remain at the current level of pressure on prices and the different restrictions that have happened regarding businesses, transportation, things of that nature. And that is the current state of the global fuel crisis and its effect on the Philippines. We are in a state of emergency declared by executive order by the President of the Philippines. And I want to give you guys some ideas of some down the road problems that might occur if this issue continues to accelerate or even stays at a current level. Right now, they're just dealing with the oil crisis and trying to make sure that the oil supplies go past June, which has been stated many times as the expected end of the supply holdings of the Philippines. And that expectation was updated and mentioned by the government after the Russian procurement of the 2.5 million barrels of oil. The exports of the Philippines are varied, but its main export is integrated circuits. Well, what are integrated circuits, Nate? Well, I'm glad you asked. Integrated circuits are used in all consumer electronics. Their main exports are to the countries of Hong Kong, China, and the United States, with the Hong Kong really taking up a majority of the imports of those integrated circuits. So when you're talking consumer electronics, you're talking things like cell phones, tablets, laptops, personal computers, car manufacturing parts that are circuitry related, right? We've all drove cars in the past where they were mostly mechanical. Well, guess what? Now they're mostly computer, right? So there could be huge disruptions in these markets in the next couple of years. But you've already seen a huge increase in the costs of things of that nature because of the RAM crunch. The price of RAM memory for your computer, processing power for your computer rather, the processing power, has already been through the roof with the advent of AI and all these large corporations consuming as much as they can, making private deals with private companies. In fact, there was one company that said they weren't even going to make personal RAM anymore. They were only going to make RAM for these AI companies. I was looking at my laptop I bought 5 years ago. The same exact specs are like the same exact price now as they were 5 years ago. And even though inflation's been very high, the swoop of technology is supposed to make this computer completely outdated and almost worthless, but it's not. And that's a problem. If the fuel prices remain at an elevated rate of two times of what they are or what they were prior to the conflict, then that could mean a very, very large escalation in the prices of consumer electronics 1 to 2 years in the future. And maybe even earlier if enough of the big banks and enough of the big corporations decide to buy up the stock in those companies and decide to basically supply hoard if they figure that out. Our greatest hope is that this conflict comes to a swift and quick end. I'm still extremely curious of why the Philippines was authorized payment-free movement of their oil through the Strait of Hormuz by Iran. And frankly, the whole thing is baffling. But we can know some of what's going on and some of what to expect. This has probably been the worst time for me to have a $500 a month budget or 30,000 peso budget inside the Philippines. You can see day one right here. Click on that link to see what day one of the challenge was and exactly what's entailed in it. God bless the Philippines. God bless the Filipino people. And I'll see you guys later down the path.